Eli, I'm pulling you from the Q3 review. My fingers paused over the keyboard. Lancaster will handle it going forward. He gestured toward the man sitting 2 seats down. He's got sharper instincts than you. More intuitive with the numbers. Lancaster didn't look at me. He studied his phone like it held secrets. I nodded quietly. Understood. Gerald's smirk widened. He wanted a reaction. A protest. Something he could use to justify what he'd already decided. I gave him nothing. The meeting dissolved. Chairs scraped. Voices faded into the hallway. I gathered my files slowly, methodically, while my pulse hammered beneath my ribs. 3 months of work. 3 months of building the financial framework for Redfront Technologies' largest product launch. And now Lancaster, who'd been here 6 weeks, would present it as his own. I walked back to my desk and sat in the gray afternoon light. The office felt different. Smaller somehow. The familiar hum of computers and distant conversations seemed muted, like I was hearing everything through water. I'd built that Q3 model from nothing. Started with raw data from 12 different departments. Sales projections from the field teams. Manufacturing costs from the production facilities in Ohio and Taiwan. R&D expenditures that changed weekly as the engineering team pivoted and adjusted. I'd spent late nights reconciling discrepancies. I'd caught errors that would have inflated our margins by millions, errors that would have looked good until an auditor questioned them. And Gerald had just handed it to someone who wouldn't know a variance analysis from a balance sheet. That evening, I drove home in silence. No radio. No podcasts. Just the sound of tires on asphalt and my own thoughts circling. My apartment was dark when I arrived. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I sat on the couch and stared at the wall. My phone buzzed. A text from my friend Zoe. Drinks tonight? You sound like you need them. I hadn't told her anything yet. She just knew. Rain check. Long day. You okay? I stared at the question for a long moment. Yeah. Just tired. It wasn't exactly a lie. The discovery came 2 days later. I was reviewing archived reports when I noticed the discrepancy. A small one. The kind most people wouldn't catch unless they'd built the model from scratch. Lancaster had changed the revenue projections. Not by much. Just enough to make the numbers look cleaner. Rounder. More investor-friendly. But the formulas didn't reconcile anymore. I opened his version and mine side by side. The differences bloomed across my screen like warnings. He'd adjusted cost allocations without updating the corresponding line items. He'd shifted depreciation schedules to inflate short-term gains. The revenue recognition timeline was wrong. He'd pulled forward sales that wouldn't close until Q4, making Q3 look stronger than it actually was. It looked good on the surface. Underneath, it was wrong. I sat back and exhaled slowly. This wasn't creative accounting. This was misrepresentation. And Gerald had signed off on it. I pulled up the email chain. There it was. Gerald's response to Lancaster's revised projections. Looks great. Much cleaner presentation. Let's run with this version. No questions. No verification. Just approval. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying Gerald's words. Sharper instincts. As if accuracy were a weakness. As if diligence were something to replace. I lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, thinking about what this meant. If those numbers went to the board, Redfront would be reporting false data. When the external auditors arrived in 3 weeks, they'd catch it. They always did. And when they asked who was responsible, Gerald would point at me. I was still listed as the lead analyst on the project documentation. My name was on the original files. Lancaster had simply revised my work and resubmitted it. If this blew up, I'd be the obvious scapegoat. The analyst who couldn't get the numbers right. The one who'd been replaced because of performance issues. Gerald had already built the narrative. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I started compiling evidence. Not dramatically. Not frantically. Just carefully. I pulled the original files. I documented every change Lancaster had made. I cross-referenced emails, meeting notes, version histories. I built a timeline that showed exactly when the numbers diverged and who had approved each alteration. I created a comparison document. 2 columns. Original projections versus Lancaster's revisions. Line by line. Formula by formula. The discrepancies were clear once you knew where to look. Revenue, overstated by $3.2 million. Operating expenses, understated by $1.8 million. Net margin, inflated by nearly 4 percentage points. It wasn't catastrophic. But it was material. Significant enough that it would change investor perception. Significant enough that the SEC would care. I saved everything to a personal drive. Encrypted it. Made backups. Then I went to work like nothing had changed. The office felt strange that week. People congratulated Lancaster on taking over the Q3 review. He smiled modestly and accepted their praise like he'd earned it. I watched from my desk, silent. Gerald passed me once in the hallway and didn't acknowledge me. I might as well have been furniture. On Wednesday, I had lunch with Zoe. We met at the small Thai place 2 blocks from Redfront's headquarters. She studied me across the table. You look exhausted. I'm fine. Eli. I've known you since college. You're not fine. I picked up my pad thai. Work stuff. It'll pass. Is it that CFO? The one you said was a nightmare? He's complicated. Zoe frowned. Complicated how? I hesitated. Then I told her. Not everything. Just the broad strokes. The reassignment. The altered numbers. The setup I could feel forming around me. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back. You need to report this. I know. So why haven't you? Because I'm scared. The admission surprised me. I hadn't meant to say it out loud. Zoe reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then be scared and do it anyway. I kept my head down for the next 48 hours. I arrived early. Left late. Smiled at colleagues in the hallway. Lancaster passed me once near the kitchen and nodded like we were friendly. I nodded back. Inside, I was a tightening spring. On Thursday afternoon, I found myself standing outside Claudia Brenner's office. Claudia was head of internal compliance. She was in her late 50s, gray hair cut short, always wore dark blazers and practical shoes. She'd been with Redfront for 12 years. She was also famously impartial. 2 years ago, she'd flagged a senior VP for expense violations. He'd been charging personal travel to company accounts. When he threatened her career, she'd documented that too and reported him to the board. He was terminated within a week. If anyone would take this seriously, it was Claudia. I knocked. Come in. She looked up from her computer, reading glasses perched on her nose. Eli. What can I do for you? I closed the door. I need to report something. I didn't go into her office. Not yet. Instead, I went back to my desk and composed an email. I wanted everything documented. I wanted a paper trail that couldn't be erased or misrepresented. Claudia, I've identified inconsistencies in the Q3 financial review that may require your attention before the audit. The revised projections contain material discrepancies that misrepresent revenue recognition, expense allocation, and margin calculations. I have documentation supporting these concerns. Please let me know if you'd like to discuss. I attached 3 files. The comparison document. The original model. The email chain showing Gerald's approval. Then I hovered over the send button. This was it. The moment everything changed. I thought about Gerald's smirk. About Lancaster's indifference. About the way they'd dismissed me like I was disposable. I hit send. Then I sat very still, staring at my screen, waiting for the panic to hit. It didn't. Instead, I felt something else. Something quiet and solid. Resolve. Claudia replied within an hour. Let's meet. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. My office. I barely slept again that night. I kept running through scenarios. What if she didn't believe me? What if she thought I was retaliating for being removed from the project? What if Gerald convinced her I was the problem? But I also kept thinking about Zoe's words. Be scared and do it anyway. The next morning, I arrived 10 minutes early. Claudia's office was small, lined with binders and framed certifications. A single window overlooked the parking lot. She gestured for me to sit. Walk me through it. I did. Slowly. Methodically. I showed her the original projections. The altered versions. The emails where Lancaster claimed he was streamlining the data. The approval chain that led directly to Gerald. Claudia's face remained neutral, but her pen moved quickly across her notepad. She asked pointed questions. When did you first notice the discrepancy? Did anyone else raise concerns? Has Lancaster made other changes you're aware of? I answered everything honestly. When I finished, she leaned back. You understand what this means? Yes. If you're right, this is a compliance issue. If you're wrong, you've just accused the CFO of negligence. I'm not wrong. She studied me for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable. Leave this with me. I walked back to my desk with my chest tight and my hands cold. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if Claudia would act or if she'd bury it to avoid conflict. Corporate politics were complicated. Gerald had been with Redfront for 8 years. He had relationships with board members. He played golf with the CEO. I was a mid-level analyst with 3 years at the company. Who would they believe? I opened my email and tried to focus on other work. Budget reconciliations. Expense reports. Mundane tasks that required no thought. But my mind kept circling back to Gerald's smirk. To Lancaster's indifference. To the way they dismissed me like I was replaceable. Maybe I was. But the numbers weren't. 3 days passed. I heard nothing. The office felt heavier. Conversation seemed quieter. Or maybe I was just imagining it. Lancaster walked past my desk once. He was on his phone, laughing about something. He didn't even glance at me. I wondered if he knew. If Gerald had told him someone was questioning the numbers. On Tuesday, I saw Gerald in the executive dining room. He was having lunch with 2 board members. They were all smiling. Relaxed. I felt a twist of doubt. Maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe I should have kept quiet. Then I remembered the numbers. The formulas that didn't reconcile. The revenue that didn't exist yet. No. I'd done the right thing. Even if no one believed me. On Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. Claudia Brenner would like to see you. Now. My heart lurched. I stood slowly and walked down the hallway. My legs felt unsteady. When I reached her office, the door was half open. Inside, I saw 2 people I didn't expect. Warren Kessler, Redfront's general counsel. And Diane Ortega, the chief operating officer. Claudia waved me in. Close the door. I did. My mouth was dry. I sat in the chair across from them and waited. Warren spoke first. His voice was calm, almost clinical. We've reviewed your documentation. We've also conducted our own analysis of the financial reports submitted for Q3. I couldn't breathe. And? Diane leaned forward. Her expression was unreadable. You were right. The relief hit me like a wave. But it was brief. Warren continued. The discrepancies you identified represent material misstatements. If those numbers had gone to the board, we'd be facing regulatory scrutiny. Possibly penalties. Claudia added, we're launching a formal investigation. Lancaster and Gerald will be placed on administrative leave pending review. I blinked. Both of them? Gerald approved the changes, Diane said quietly. He signed off on reports he should have verified. That's a failure of oversight at minimum. At worst, it's complicity. Warren's gaze sharpened. Lancaster's changes were deliberate. He knew what he was doing. But Gerald's approval gave those changes legitimacy. He didn't just fail to catch the errors. He actively endorsed them. I sat very still. What happens now? We'll interview everyone involved, Warren said. We'll review all communications related to the Q3 report. We'll determine whether this was incompetence or intentional fraud. Diane's expression softened slightly. We'll need you to testify if this escalates. Are you comfortable with that? Yes. Good. She paused. And Eli? This took courage. Most people wouldn't have come forward. I didn't know what to say. Warren stood. We'll be in touch. In the meantime, don't discuss this with anyone. Not colleagues, not friends. This investigation is confidential. I nodded. Claudia walked me to the door. As I left, she said quietly, "You did the right thing." I left the office in a daze. The hallway felt surreal. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone laughed in a nearby cubicle. The coffee machine hissed and gurgled. Everything looked normal. But nothing felt normal. I walked back to my desk and sat down slowly. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something else. Something that felt like vindication and exhaustion tangled together. I opened my laptop and stared at the spreadsheets. The numbers were still there. Clean. Accurate. Unchanged. I thought about calling Zoe. But Warren's warning echoed in my mind. Don't discuss this with anyone. So I sat in silence and tried to process what had just happened. The weekend passed in a blur. I tried to distract myself. I went for a run Saturday morning. I cleaned my apartment. I watched movies I'd seen a dozen times. But I couldn't stop thinking about Monday. What would happen when Gerald found out? When Lancaster realized someone had reported them? Would they know it was me? Of course they would. I was the only person who could have caught those errors. The only person who'd built the original model. Sunday night, I barely slept. I kept imagining Gerald's face. His anger. The way he'd looked at me in that conference room, dismissing me like I was nothing. Would he come after me? Would he try to discredit me? Would he claim I was lying, that I'd fabricated evidence out of spite? I didn't know. But I also knew I couldn't take it back. The truth was the truth. And the truth had to matter. Monday morning arrived like a storm. I was at my desk early, reviewing files, when I heard shouting from the executive wing. Gerald's voice. Loud. Furious. Who reported the wrong numbers? The office went silent. People froze mid-conversation. Heads turned toward the noise. Then came Gerald's footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Purposeful. He burst into the main floor, face red, tie loosened, jacket gone. Who the hell flagged my report? No one answered. His eyes swept the room, landing on faces, searching for guilt. For weakness. For whoever had dared to challenge him. Then he saw me. Eli. I met his gaze. He crossed the floor in 4 strides and stopped at my desk. Close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. Was it you? I didn't flinch. The numbers were wrong, Gerald. They were fine. They were investor ready. They were inaccurate. His jaw clenched. A vein pulsed in his temple. You don't know what you've done. You just torched your career over a rounding error. It wasn't a rounding error. It was misrepresentation. He leaned in, lowering his voice to something venomous. You think you're smarter than me? You think you can embarrass me in front of the board? I stayed calm. Quiet. I think the audit would have caught it. And I think you would have blamed me. He froze. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Recognition. Maybe even fear. Because I was right. We both knew it. If the auditors had found those errors, Gerald would have pointed at me. At my name on the original files. At my removal from the project. He would have said I'd sabotaged the report out of spite. That I'd intentionally submitted bad numbers before I was replaced. And everyone would have believed him. Then Diane's voice cut through the silence. Gerald. My office. Now. He straightened. Turned. Walked toward her without another word. The office exhaled. People returned to their computers, but conversations were hushed. Furtive glances were exchanged. Everyone knew something major was happening. I sat very still, my heart hammering. Lancaster appeared in the doorway a moment later. He looked pale. Shaken. His usual confidence was gone. He scanned the office, found me, and walked over. "Did you do this?" His voice was low, tight. "I reported the discrepancies." "Yes. You realize you just ended my career. You altered financial data. That ended your career." His mouth opened. Closed. He looked like he wanted to say more. But then Claudia appeared behind him. "Mr. Lancaster. Come with me, please." He followed her without argument. The investigation took 2 weeks. During that time, the executive wing was chaos. Closed-door meetings. Lawyers coming and going. Whispered conversations that stopped when anyone walked by. I worked quietly. I rebuilt the Q3 report from scratch. I verified every formula, every line item, every projection. I met with Warren twice more. He asked detailed questions about my process. About how I'd noticed the errors. About whether anyone had pressured me to stay silent. I answered everything honestly. On the second meeting, he said something that surprised me. "You know, most people in your position would have ignored this. It would have been easier. Safer. Maybe. So why didn't you?" I thought about that. Because if I'd stayed quiet, I would have been complicit. And I can't live with that. He nodded slowly. "That's a good answer." Lancaster never returned. He resigned the day after the investigation began. Apparently, Warren's team found emails between him and Gerald. Discussions about optimizing the presentation. About making the numbers more appealing to investors. Lancaster had known exactly what he was doing. And Gerald had encouraged it. The resignation statement was brief. Pursuing other opportunities. No mention of the investigation. No explanation. But everyone knew. Gerald lasted longer. He fought. He hired a lawyer. He claimed the changes were minor adjustments within acceptable accounting standards. But Warren's team was thorough. They found other instances where Gerald had pushed for aggressive reporting. Where he'd prioritized appearance over accuracy. It was a pattern. And patterns were hard to defend. 2 weeks after the investigation began, Redfront's board issued a statement. "Gerald Sutton is no longer with the company, effective immediately. We thank him for his service and wish him well in his future endeavors." The statement cited failure to uphold fiduciary standards. The PR team spun it as a commitment to transparency and accountability. I didn't attend the company-wide meeting where the announcement was made. I stayed at my desk and finished my work. The office changed after that. People were more cautious. More deliberate. There was a sense that leadership was watching. That standards mattered. The new interim CFO was a woman named Victoria Park. She'd been the VP of Finance at a pharmaceutical company before Redfront recruited her. Her first week, she scheduled meetings with every member of the finance team. Individual meetings. No agenda. Just conversations. When my turn came, I walked into her office nervous. She smiled warmly. "Eli. Sit, please." I sat. "I've read your file," she said. "Impressive work. Consistent accuracy. Strong analytical skills." She paused. "And considerable courage." I didn't know how to respond to that. "I also read the report you submitted to Claudia. The documentation was thorough. Professional. Exactly what an analyst should do when they identify a problem." I was just doing my job. Most people don't. Most people look the other way. Especially when it's their boss who's wrong. She leaned back. "I want you to know that kind of integrity is valued here. It should have been valued before, but it will be now." I nodded slowly. "Thank you. How are you holding up?" The question surprised me. No one had asked that. "I'm okay. It's not easy being a whistleblower. Even when you're right. Even when you're vindicated. I don't think of myself as a whistleblower." "No?" She smiled faintly. "What do you think of yourself as?" "An analyst. Someone who reports what the numbers say." "That's a good way to look at it." She stood. I'm glad you're on my team, Eli. A month later, Diane called me into her office. We're promoting you. I looked up, startled. To what? Senior financial analyst. Reporting directly to Victoria. She paused. We're also adjusting your compensation. Significantly. I didn't know what to say. Diane smiled faintly. You saved this company from a regulatory disaster. That doesn't go unnoticed. I just did my job. Most people wouldn't have. She leaned back. Most people would have kept quiet. Let someone else take the fall. You didn't. That matters. I thought about that. She was probably right. Thank you, I said quietly. Don't thank me. You earned it. She slid a folder across the desk. Your new employment agreement. Review it. Let HR know if you have questions. I took the folder. As I stood to leave, Diane added, Eli? One more thing. I turned back. Don't let this make you cynical. What happened with Gerald and Lancaster, that's not normal. Most people in this company are good at their jobs. They care about doing things right. I know. Good. Because we need people like you. People who won't compromise on accuracy just because it's convenient. I left her office and walked back through the hallways. The building looked the same. Same gray carpet. Same humming lights. Same distant sound of keyboards clicking. But something felt different. I passed colleagues who smiled at me now. Who nodded with respect. Word had spread, not the details, but the outline. That I'd caught something serious. That I'd reported it. That I'd been right. I wasn't sure how I felt about the attention. Part of me wanted to disappear back into anonymity. To just be an analyst again. To work with numbers and spreadsheets and let the drama fade. But another part of me felt something I hadn't expected. Pride. Not arrogance. Not superiority. Just quiet pride in having done the right thing when it mattered. That evening, I met Zoe for dinner. She hugged me hard when I arrived. I've been dying to hear what happened. You went radio silent for weeks. Confidentiality agreement. And now? It's resolved. We ordered wine and appetizers, and I told her everything. The investigation. Gerald's confrontation. Lancaster's resignation. The promotion. Zoe listened, eyes wide, occasionally interrupting with questions or exclamations. When I finished, she raised her glass. To Eli. Who has bigger balls than half the men I know? I laughed. Clinked my glass against hers. I don't know about that. I do. You could have been fired. You could have been blacklisted. But you did it anyway. I was terrified. Of course you were. That's what makes it brave. She leaned forward, her expression turning serious. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you first saw those numbers were wrong, before you reported it, did you think about just letting it go? Just walking away? I considered the question. Yes. For about 5 minutes. What changed your mind? I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the light catch in the dark liquid. I kept thinking about what would happen when the auditors found it. And they would have. These things always come out eventually. But that's not the only reason. She knew me too well. No, I admitted. I also kept thinking about my dad. Zoe waited. He worked in construction for 30 years. When I was in high school, his foreman told him to sign off on work that wasn't up to code. Said it was fine, that no one would notice. My dad refused. He documented everything and reported it to the site inspector. What happened? He got fired. The foreman made sure of it. My dad was unemployed for 8 months. I paused. But the building didn't collapse. No one got hurt. And he could look at himself in the mirror. Zoe's eyes softened. He taught you well. He taught me that integrity isn't about what's easy. It's about what you can live with. We sat in silence for a moment. The restaurant hummed around us, conversations, laughter, the clink of silverware on plates. I'm proud of you, Zoe said quietly. Your dad would be too. My throat tightened. Thanks. She smiled and shifted gears. So, senior financial analyst. Does that come with a fancy new office? No office. Just a better desk. Boring. You should demand an office. With a window. I don't need an office. Everyone needs an office. How else will people know you're important? I laughed. I think I'm okay without that. We drank and talked about other things. Her job. Her dating life. The trip she was planning to Portugal. Normal things. Easy things. It felt good to be normal again. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The spreadsheets waited, clean and familiar. I took a breath and started typing. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long golden lines across the floor. The office hummed with quiet productivity. Someone laughed in a nearby cubicle. The coffee machine gurgled. Phones rang and were answered. Everything was normal. Everything was right. I worked steadily through the afternoon, losing myself in the rhythm of analysis. Numbers appearing. Formulas calculating. Patterns emerging. This was what I was good at. This was where I belonged. Not in corporate drama. Not in investigations or confrontations. Just here. With the numbers. Finding the truth in the data. Around 5, Victoria stopped by my desk. Heading out soon? In a bit. Just finishing something. She smiled. Don't stay too late. You've earned some rest. I will. She hesitated. Eli? I meant what I said before. About integrity mattering. I'm building a new team here. A better one. And I want people I can trust. I appreciate that. I'm serious. If you ever see something wrong, anything, I want you to come to me directly. No hesitation. No fear of consequences. I met her eyes. I will. She nodded and walked away. I watched her go, thinking about how different this felt from Gerald's leadership. Victoria asked questions. She listened. She didn't dismiss concerns or demand loyalty over accuracy. It was a small thing, but it changed everything. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. This is Claudia. Just wanted to check in. How are you holding up? I stared at the message for a moment, surprised by the gesture. Claudia wasn't the warm, fuzzy type. This was unexpected. I'm good. Thank you for asking. And thank you for taking me seriously. Her response came quickly. You made it easy. Your documentation was impeccable. That's what made the difference. I smiled slightly and set my phone down. Another message appeared. For what it's worth, I've been doing this job for 12 years. You're one of maybe 3 people who've ever reported something this significant. Most people are too afraid. You should be proud. I didn't know how to respond to that. So I simply wrote. Thank you. The conversation ended there, but something about it settled the last lingering doubt in my mind. I had done the right thing. Not just technically. Not just legally. Morally. I stayed another hour, then shut down my computer. The office was mostly empty now. A few people lingered, but the energy had shifted. End of day quiet. I gathered my things and walked to the elevator. As I waited, I thought about everything that had happened. The fear. The uncertainty. The moments when I'd questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But I had been. The numbers proved it. A colleague I barely knew approached the elevator. Harrison Chen from marketing. He nodded at me. Eli, right? Yeah. I just wanted to say, what you did took guts. Everyone's talking about it. I felt heat rise to my face. I just reported what I found. Still. He smiled. The company's better for it. We all are. The elevator arrived. We stepped inside together. Thanks, I said quietly. He got off on the 3rd floor. I continued down to the lobby. As the elevator descended, I watched the numbers change. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Simple. Reliable. Predictable. That's what numbers were supposed to be. And when they weren't, when someone manipulated them, twisted them, made them lie, someone had to say something. I had been that someone. The doors opened. I stepped out into the lobby. The evening sun streamed through the glass entrance, painting everything gold. I walked through it and into the parking lot, feeling the warmth on my face. The air smelled like cut grass and distant rain. The sky was clear, but clouds gathered on the horizon. I unlocked my car and sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. My reflection stared back at me from the rearview mirror. I looked tired. But I also looked different somehow. Stronger, maybe. Or just more certain. I thought about my dad again. About the choice he'd made all those years ago. The price he'd paid for doing what was right. I understood it now in a way I hadn't before. Integrity wasn't comfortable. It wasn't safe. It didn't come with guarantees. But it was the only thing you truly owned. The only thing no one could take from you. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. The numbers were right. And that was enough.